Hello, this is Joe Folkman, and welcome to another webinar today. Today we're going to talk about 6 keys to having it all. Have you ever wanted to have it all, and can you have it all? We think you can around delivering outstanding results and creating an engaged team. Now, this whole idea of having it all is kind of interesting because in my experience, sometimes when you do B, you sacrifice A. And a couple of examples of that is a few years ago I met this fellow who was the CEO for a business, and he called himself the turnaround guy. So he'd come into the organization, he'd get really clear about what they wanted. He'd then go to the people and the employees and say, look, some of you are going to go, just let you know. And then he really communicated that it was all about the bottom line and things must change. His analogy was that this whole process was just like washing your hair. He'd lather, he'd rinse, and then repeat. And so generally, he was terrific at turning around businesses, but he really was good at getting results, and he was not great at building relationships, that people didn't trust him. And he found that his life was a lot better and his effectiveness was better, is after 2 years, he'd just go to another place and turn that around. And actually, I followed him to a couple of different companies where he went to the next company and did the same thing. A few months ago, I read this story in Bloomberg, the rise and fall of working from home. And this fellow, Richard Lemire, he got this idea that he could let his employees work from home. And he says, we hire adults. They shouldn't be tied to an office 5 days a week. You hear this a lot in organizations. And he said, I always assumed that you can get your work done anywhere as long as you can actually get it done. Now, he let everybody go to their home offices, and then he found out that it wasn't working real well because the employees started taking advantage of this. One was unavailable for hours at a time. Another wouldn't communicate with their coworkers all day. He said the last straw was when someone refused to come in for a meeting because they had plans to go to the Hamptons. Well, he really trusted his employees. He created this positive message. He trusted them, and then the results suffered. So sometimes you can't have it all. I got a call several months ago from a client in London, and this client said, is it possible for a person to really be great at delivering results, get great results, but not sacrifice the team? Is it possible for you to do both, to build a really engaged team where people love working there and also deliver results? Can you do that? Well, we measured that, and here's the things that we measure with. With driver results, we ask questions like, does everything possible achieve goals, achieves agreed upon goals in time, and follows through on objectives? That gets that results part. And then on the people skills part, we measured balancing getting results with concern for the needs of others, is trusted by members of the work group, stays in touch with issues and concerns of individuals, promotes a high level of cooperation, resolves conflict, achieves objectives required at a high level of cooperation. These all got at the people end of it. And we looked at those 2 pieces, and we looked at people who were in the top quartile on both of those measures. So they really delivered results in the top quartile, and they were very good. Great relationships with people, very high cooperation and teamwork. When we looked at our population, and this is on 51,000 leaders, we actually found that there was 13% of that population that was good at both. They had good relationships, and they also delivered results. Now, that's not a huge percentage of the population, but it is a fair number of people, which gave us the opportunity to do a study. And so we started the study by looking at this ability to do both, and then we looked across different age groups. So this next graph I'm showing you shows various age groups up to 30, 31 to 40, and the percentages represent the percent of people who do both. And what you see when you look at that is that the young group, 31% do both, and then 31 to 40, 16%. But then it levels off at 10%. And so young people were pretty good at doing both, but as people got older, they tended to kind of move from one thing to the other. Now, sometimes they went to more results-driven, and other times they went to be more people-oriented. But this ability to sort of juggle, to keep both balls in the air, went down as they aged. Then we looked at levels of supervision. And again, this graph shows the percentage of people who do both. And as you can see there, 24% of supervisors are in the top quartile at doing both. But when you look at top management, it's only 10%. And so you saw this tendency for people to kind of, when they early on in their career, they were sort of juggling this, but as time went on, they moved to either the people or the task side of things. As we looked at geographies, and again, this is the percentage of people that can do both well, we found in the U.S. 17%, in Asia 14%, but you get down to Africa and Europe, and it's around 2%. So those numbers go down significantly. I think culture plays an important part in this. Finally, we looked at functions. The sales organization had 27% of their people that did both. And typically when you talk to salespeople, they will really they really get focused on their goals. They need to achieve it. They need to hit the target, but they also realize that they have to be great at building relationships and creating those positive relationships with others in order to make the sales. And so it's a really standard common practice for sales and for customer service, to try and do both. But you look down at manufacturing and engineering, and you're down at 5% and 6%, and product development 7%, HR and training 7%. So people, again, they drift to one side or the other. And then finally, we looked at gender. Again, this is the percentage of people that can do both. And surprise, surprise, women 15%, men 13%. So women were better at this combination than men. Now, we asked the question, which is more likely if people are drifting to one thing or the other, the results of the people, where do they drift to? What we found is that when we looked at the data, about 71% of our population of over 50,000 leaders were scoring higher. They were scored higher on their 360 results, at getting results, than they were on their people skills. Only 29% were scored higher on people skills than results. So if there's a drift, you can kind of guess which way it's drifting. It's drifting more towards results. As people get older and as people move to higher positions, it doesn't always do that. Sometimes you'll find people drift back to people, but the more common trend is they're drifting towards results. This all caused us to wonder, how is it that a person can do both? And this whole idea that if you do one, you don't get the other. Is it possible to have it all, to do both? So we have this group of 13% of the population that were good at doing both. And what we did is we took that group and we looked at 40 behaviors where we looked at that group compared to the rest of the population. And what we were looking for is what these people did. What was the secret to their ability to kind of be good at both? We found 6 factors or clusters of items. These clusters appeared to be behaviors that helped people drive for results and helped them build positive skills with others and create a positive environment. They did both, and they were equally good at generating those results on both sides of the equation. And so what we thought about these 6 skills, and we thought about what to call them, and we came up with this idea of the behavioral bridges. And these 6 behaviors, and you can see them on the bridge there, they are the behaviors that really enable a person to be good on both sides of the bridge. They are good on the drive for results part of the bridge, and they're good on the people. They really hold up the bridge for both those skills, and they enable leaders to do both. If you've ever listened to one of our webinars, you'll know that, I like people to listen, but what I'd like you to do is think about these 6 different skills. And I'd like you to think about, is there one of these that would help me to really increase my ability to have it all? And so we're going to go through and talk about these 6 skills, give you some ideas about them, and really describe how these skills help you do both. What I'd like you to do is think about which one could help you. Let me talk about the first one. Communicates clear strategy and direction. Several years ago, I heard about this story of Florence May Chadwick. Now, as a young woman, she was set the record for swimming the English Channel in both directions. Now, she did it in record time. I'm sure that record's been broken now. She also was the first woman to swim the channel to Catalina Island. And there's this wonderful story about when she's swimming to Catalina Island, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but the island always has fog around it. And so as she's swimming out to the island, they approach this fog bank. It's just dense fog. And, she keeps swimming and keeps swimming. And finally, she gets very discouraged, and they say, no, you're not that far away. Actually, they didn't know how far away they were because they didn't have GPS. This was in the 1950s. And so she swam for another hour. And finally, she gave up. She's in this dense fog. She gives up. She gets on the boat, and turns out she's 1 mile from Catalina Island. And so 2 months later, she does it again. She tries it again, and she hits the fog again. But this time, she had in her mind, she kept picturing that shoreline. She kept picturing that island, what it looked like. And she kept that image in her mind, and she hit that fog, and she kept swimming. And with that determination, she was able to make it. As I think about that story, about the power of communicating the vision and keeping that in your mind, I know that having a clear vision helps people to deliver results. Peak results hinge on everybody having clarity about the direction and understanding of the strategy and how to achieve it. But at the same time, when people are lost or confused, they quickly become dissatisfied. When people don't connect what they're doing to the outcomes the organization achieves, they don't see the value in their work. So leaders who provide and communicate a clear vision get a much more engaged team. This ability helps a person drive for results. It helps you deliver results and get the things you need, but it also helps with the people skills. So we have a few questions. Question number 1, when was the last time you clearly communicated to your team or individuals the organization's strategy and direction? If you do it once a year, that's not enough. Once a month? I don't think so. Can you do this too often? I don't believe you can. A few years ago, I was going into a meeting with the CEO, and as we're walking in the meeting, my colleague who worked for the company said, "You watch, he'll talk about the strategy." And I turned to my colleague and said, "We're talking about turnover, not strategy." And so we're in the meeting. We've been there for about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, yes, the CEO starts talking about the strategy. He always talks about the strategy. He's a broken record. But he brought it into every conversation. He kept people focused on what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, what value that creates. When you do that, that helps you to deliver results, but it also helps you to create enthusiasm and excitement and energy and a positive work environment. The next behavioral bridge was inspires and motivates others. We did an analysis of our leadership effectiveness data. We measured 52,000 leaders, and we measured them on those 16 differentiating competencies. And the graph you're seeing here shows you the effectiveness on the 16. And so the highest rated competency of these 52,000 leaders on average was drives results and then takes initiative, technical expertise. But if you look down at the bottom of the chart, the lowest rated behavior was inspires and motivates others. It was number 16 out of 16. And so it was interesting then to look at, we asked people which behavior was more important. And guess what comes out as the most important behavior? Well, it's the ability to inspire and motivate others. Whenever I describe this data, I always can imagine this scenario where it's like somebody says, Houston, I think we have a problem. So the competency that is generally the hardest, the most difficult competency, the competency that people are the worst at, is the most important competency that people think is critical for people to do well. When you think about that, that creates a problem. And so what we found is that a lot of organizations are pretty good at driving for results, but not so good at people skills. And we did a study where we looked at both of these skills, drive for results and inspires. And we looked at which one of these has the greatest value. And so what we did is we looked at the best leaders in our database, those in the top 10%. And we found that if you were good at inspiring, but you weren't very good at driving for results, you were below the 75th percentile, there was only 10% of the population that had that in their profile. So they were good at A but not at B. They were inspiring, but they didn't drive very hard. And then we looked at B, not A. Now, I was just an organization, and I was showing them this data, and I said, which one of those two skills are you better at? And they said, drive for results. And I said, so is this number going to be higher or lower? And they said, oh, it's going to be higher. And I go, well, it's not. It's lower. It's 5%. So if you're good at drives for results but not inspiring, there's only a 5% chance that you're going to be a great leader. But turns out if you're good at both, if you're inspiring and you're good at driving, you'd expect 15%, but you actually get 85%. And we call that a powerful combination. And when people look at this, they start to realize that one of the keys to really getting results is inspiring. And in our data, we oftentimes call that drives for results push, and we call the inspiring pull. And so what we found is the best leaders do both. And as you know, when we looked at our data, we found that 78% of leaders were higher on their ability to drive for results than their ability to inspire and motivate others. And often, we refer to this as push and pull. And so what we'd say is that the real way to get results is to keep pushing but start pulling. Don't stop pushing. But if you do both, and that's why we think this inspire and motivates really helps you to get results. But it also helps you with the people end of things. That push doesn't. Sometimes the push really it eliminates the relationship building and the positive feelings. Inspiring unleashes the energy within people to do their best work. Most of us want to make a positive difference in our work and in the world, and leaders can inspire and generate loyalty, commitment, passion, and enthusiasm with their team members and excel in creating a positive work environment. So the ability to inspire and motivate helps you with the results, but it also helps you with the people. Now here's some question. What's your first preference when you need to motivate others? What's your go-to skill? Is it to push? Is it to set a deadline? Is it to say to people, you got to do better? Or is it to pull? Is it to inspire them and get them excited and passionate about it? So which do you tend to do first? We're going to allow you to take a little self-assessment, and we're going to give you some information about that measures your preference for pushing or pulling. And I think this will be a fun self-assessment for you to take just to see which one of those skills you tend to do first. Well, the next one of the 6 behaviors that made a real difference in your ability to both get results and create positive environment is establishing stretch goals. Now, stretch goals is interesting. And if you think about your attitude about stretch goals, do you love them or hate them? And I find people on both sides of the equation here. See, people either love it or hate it. And sometimes people hate it because they feel like they've been pushed too hard or they've been abused by them. let me tell you, share with you the research about them. There's this interesting paradox about satisfaction and effort. I mean, if you ask people what would make them happy, they'd talk about, well, a break, less work, a vacation, a little beach time. And, it seems like, that if we just sort of could chill and relax and sit back, we'd be happier. But what's fascinating about this paradox with satisfaction and effort is that the experience that we have in life, and you get more satisfaction with challenging assignments, accomplishing difficult tasks, making significant contributions, and making the possible impossible. It's an interesting process to think about. We do an exercise oftentimes with leaders where we say, think about an extraordinary moment you've had at work. And what was that like and what were you doing? And everybody describes the situation where they were doing something that was challenging or difficult, but it made a real contribution and it was hard. I mean, when you go to work and you do some work that a monkey could do, that isn't motivating, and that doesn't build up your satisfaction with your job or make you excited. It's just like anybody could do this. But when you go to work and make something happen and create value and do something that's difficult, you actually go home and say, you know what? I'm a pretty valuable person, and I can make a difference in the world, and I can have an impact. What we know about stretch goals is they create more results. Sometimes on Saturdays, I get up in the morning and I don't really have any specific outcomes in mind, but I stay pretty busy. I do what's called putter. I putter around and I do some work here and I do some work there. And by the end of the day, I've accomplished a few things. But other days, I have some specific things that I need to accomplish. That's a list given to me by my wife. And I have a deadline. I got to do them by this specific time. We want to go to dinner that night. I find I'm working a lot harder and getting a lot more done when I have the stretch goals. And we've known this in business for a long time, that setting stretch goals and getting the team members to accept that goal gets others to work harder and raise the bar. It delivers more results. But here's the interesting thing. When people set stretch goals and they collaboratively get involved in setting those goals, amazing things happen at work. Work becomes fun, and everyone is involved, and they're all in, and people feel like they've made a real difference. So another way to have it all, set stretch goals. So my question for you on this, is there a stretch goal that you could get your team to embrace? And just try to do that and see what happens. The next one of the behavioral bridges is high integrity and trust. And on this graph here, what you'll see is capability on integrity and trust from the bottom 10%, next 25 to the top 10%. And what you see is this amazing, when you look at drive for results and when you look at the people skills, the higher the integrity and trust, the higher the drive for results, the higher the people skills. These are so intercorrelated, and they really go together very well. Now, look, if a leader doesn't have high integrity and trust, then team members start to assume that that person's trying to manipulate them. They're not going to go to bat for you. If people don't trust you, they'll assume they're being taken advantage of. When you're a trusted leader, your motives are beyond reproach, and people know that you're trying to be honest with them. But also, this ability to have integrity and trust builds people skills. A key component to building positive relationships with others is being trusted. Being trusted it makes a difference, and when you walk your talk. They never ask team members to do something that they would not be willing to do. So as you think about another way to have it all, this high integrity and trust. Do people trust you? Do they feel like you have high integrity and that your intentions are good? Now, the next way to have it all, to get these results and people skills, is to develop others. Now, if you go to work every day and work really hard and get a paycheck every week, that's a job. But if you go to work and work hard and do something new and learn a new skill, that's a career. And the motivation is so different between those two. Now, I'm always told by managers, I have too much to do, I'm overloaded, I'm overwhelmed, I just can't get it all done. Gee, why don't you delegate some of that? Well, no one is capable. No one has the skills. And part of what happens is you think about it, if you can develop people, I mean, it's great to have one really productive, intelligent, terrific employee. You know what's better than having one? Having two or 10. And that ability to develop others gives you the ability to produce more results because you have more capability. And, when you have the right people, and, what we all learn sooner or later is that people are going to leave, people are going to get promoted. You've got to have a bench there of people that really have the skills in order to retain your productivity. So developing others helps you to get results. But when people develop, you think about somebody that's helped you develop, that's been a coach or a mentor to you. How do you feel about that person? Typically, they've really appreciated their job much more when instead of just coming and sweating and working, they're developing and learning new skills. That makes a difference in your job. So it has this ability to do both. The last one is something we call coachability. Now, to coach another person, you're coaching them. But coachability is the extent to which you're coachable. And you can have the best coach in the world, but if the person's not coachable, it doesn't do much good. And you can see examples of people that weren't very coachable, and you could see the lack of success that they have. Most great athletes, you'll see a series of coaches, and they listened to those coaches, and they really respected them. Now, on the graph here, again, we're showing you this coachability from a person who's not very coachable, bottom 10%, to a person who's absolutely incredibly coachable, top 10%. And then, again, effectiveness on drives for results and people skills. And you can see, again, this correlation between coachability and this ability to achieve both those people skills and drive for results. One of the things we find about coachability is that as people become more coachable, their results go up. Leaders who resist feedback are much like the emperor with no clothes. Since they do not seek or want feedback, people do not speak up. Problems fall in the cracks, deadlines are missed. However, if a leader seeks feedback and is receptive to advice, colleagues will not stand by if they see that their leader is about to make a mistake. So if you want to fail, don't be coachable, because people will let you fail. But when people are coachable, when leaders are coachable, when they ask for feedback and they make improvements, they're respected. And their coachability is a great example to everyone, and it makes a real difference in the team. So being more coachable helps you to be a better leader also and deliver both these results. So the 6 behavioral bridges, there they are. What I'd like to do and encourage you to do is select one of those for more development. Now, as you're thinking about that, you might be asking yourself, how do I select? I'm not sure if I'm really good at one, if I'm brilliant, or I'm terrible. And most of us, what's interesting is that we believe that our own intuition is pretty accurate. Well, we tested your ability to evaluate your skills versus others. What we found is that other people were twice as accurate at evaluating your strengths and weaknesses that you are. And so our advice, if you are questioning right now, do I have this skill? Do I not have this skill? We'd encourage you to get some current 360 feedback on these skills. Now, some people say to me, gee, I did that 365 years ago. Well, has anything changed in your job or your life or the work environment or the organization in the last 5 years? Of course it does. We'd recommend that People get a 360 feedback every 2 to 3 years just to get an update on where they are given their environment changes, their direct reports changes, everything changes. And that'll give you a better sense and an accurate read on these different skills. Now, the assessment is a great way to do that, but also just knowing that the development guide is such a great help because we have this thing called the Competency Companion Development Guide that really helps people improve. And we've shown that the majority of people that go through our 360 process make a significant positive change. So we'd like to know how we did on this webinar. So if you can take a few minutes to fill out the post-assessment, we'd like that. We're going to provide you with a link to do this push-pull survey, and we'd like to encourage you to do that. Feel free to share that with your colleagues at work or your friends or even your spouse at home, and that's always interesting to see that. If you'd like more information on how you can participate in an assessment evaluating your strengths and weaknesses on the competencies we've described in this webinar, please contact us. We'd love to tell you about some of the things we do and how that can help you to grow your leadership strengths. And really, this whole ability to have it all, we think it's possible. So our final thought for this webinar is you can have it all. Well, not all, but we know that people can be really great at delivering results and really great at building a positive team and building relationships with others. You can increase your ability on both these dimensions. The key, the secret, is these 6 behavioral bridges that really help you to have it all. Thank you so much.